Hey there, ready to jump into some fascinating global politics.
Sure am.
This time we're setting our sights on the upcoming Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, or CHOGM 2024. It's happening in Samoa, which is a pretty big deal for a few reasons.
Yeah.
Not only is it the first time a small island developing state in the Pacific is hosting, but it's also King Charles III's first time leading the charge since taking the throne. Oh, and did I mention there's a heated election and some potentially controversial topics on the agenda?
It's definitely shaping up to be a pivotal event. You're right, the location itself is significant. For a group of nations historically tied to a colonial power, having Samoa, a nation grappling with the very real effects of climate change, host this meeting sends a powerful message. It kind of puts the focus on climate action whether they like it or not.
It makes me think of how the Maldives, another small island nation, has played a big role in climate negotiations
Right.
through the Alliance of Small Island States. So maybe Samoa taking the reins could really galvanize the Commonwealth around this issue.
I think that's a very real possibility. The theme of the CHOGM is one resilient common future, transforming our Commonwealth.
Transforming our Commonwealth.
And that transformation is going to have to include a serious commitment to climate action, especially from the larger, wealthier nations.
And speaking of transformation, let's talk about the new guy in charge, King Charles III. This is his first CHOGM since becoming head of the Commonwealth.
Right.
And it's also his first major trip abroad since his cancer diagnosis. It's got to be a lot of pressure.
I'm sure it is. There's a lot of curiosity about what direction he'll steer the organization in. Will he take a more activist approach, pushing for change on issues like climate change and social justice? Or will he maintain a more traditional diplomatic role? And on a human level, it's hard not to feel for him as he takes on this responsibility while dealing with a serious health issue.
It really adds another layer to the whole thing, doesn't it? And let's not forget about the election for the new Commonwealth Secretary General. This isn't just some backroom deal, right?
No.
This person actually has a lot of influence.
Absolutely. The Secretary General sets the agenda and steers the direction of the Commonwealth. And what's fascinating about this particular election is that all three candidates, Shirley Ayur Korbachwe from Ghana, Mamadou Tangara from Gambia, and Joshua Satipa from Lesotho, are pushing for something pretty groundbreaking, reparations for countries harmed by slavery and colonialism.
Now that's where things get really interesting, to say the least. The whole issue of reparations is a powder keg, isn't it?
It is.
You have former Jamaican Prime Minister P.J. Patterson saying reparations for slavery are definitely on the agenda at CHOGM. But then you've got the UK coming out and saying, absolutely not.
It's a highly sensitive and complex issue. The very foundation of the Commonwealth is rooted in a history of colonialism. And there's a growing movement demanding accountability for those historical injustices.
Yeah.
The fact that the UK has also ruled out making any reparation payments is only fueling the debate.
And to add fuel to that fire, the UK also said they will not be issuing an apology for their role in the slave trade at the summit. Which seems odd considering that back in 2018, the UK's own Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, said the Caribbean nations wanted reparations, not just apologies. It's like they're saying one thing and doing another.
It does appear to be a disconnect between past statements and current policy. This is definitely going to be a point of contention and one that could have lasting implications for the UK's relationship within the Commonwealth.
You have to wonder if they're underestimating the strength of feeling about this issue, especially among Caribbean nations.
I think there's a risk of that. This isn't just about historical grievances. It's about acknowledging the lasting impact of colonialism and addressing the systemic inequalities that persist today. The call for reparations is a way to right those wrongs and create a more just and equitable future.
Okay, so we've got this backdrop of historical tension, and then you throw in the fact that the leaders of South Africa and India are skipping CHOGM to attend the BRICS summit in Russia. Yeah. This feels like a big deal.
It's definitely a sign of shifting global alliances. You have to understand what BRICS is to grasp the full impact of this. It's a bloc of emerging economies, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, that are challenging the traditional Western-dominated world order. Okay. The fact that South Africa and India, both former British colonies and key Commonwealth members, are choosing to prioritize BRICS over CHDM raises serious questions about the future of the Commonwealth.
It almost feels like a vote of no confidence.
In a way, it is. It suggests that the Commonwealth needs to adapt to this changing global landscape if it wants to remain relevant.
So far, we've got a small island nation taking center stage, a new king finding his footing, a heated election with reparations at the forefront, and major players potentially jumping ship. Where do we even begin to unpack all of this?
What's fascinating is how these seemingly disparate threads are all interconnected and point towards this theme of transformation. The choice of Samoa as host highlights the vulnerability of small island states and the urgent need to address climate change. The king's presence adds a layer of historical symbolism and could potentially usher in a new era for the Commonwealth. The Secretary General race and the debate over reparations force us to confront the legacy of colonialism. And the absence of key leaders like those from South Africa and India makes you wonder,
Yeah.
is the Commonwealth losing its grip?
Okay, so we've painted the big picture, but let's zoom in on some specifics. What should we be watching for during the summit itself?
Well, on the climate change front, it'll be interesting to see what concrete commitments emerge. Small island developing states like Samoa are on the front lines, facing rising sea levels, extreme weather events, and threats to their very existence. They'll be pushing for ambitious action from the larger, wealthier Commonwealth members.
But will those bigger nations actually step up? I mean, their track record on climate action hasn't exactly been inspiring.
That's the million-dollar question. There's definitely a lot of skepticism, especially given the history of unfulfilled promises. But on the flip side, there's also a growing sense of urgency. Maybe this time, with a nation directly impacted by climate change hosting, the message will finally hit home.
It would be incredibly ironic if the Commonwealth, which includes some of the biggest polluters in the world, could come together to address climate change, especially with a nation like Samoa bearing the brunt of it as the host.
It would be a massive missed opportunity and would further damage the Commonwealth's credibility on the global stage.
Okay, so climate change is a big one. What about this whole reparations issue? Do you think there's any chance of real progress being made on that front?
That's hard to say. The UK's stance, at least publicly, seems pretty firm. They've said no to reparations and no to an official apology for the slave trade.
Doesn't that seem like a slap in the face to Caribbean nations? Especially after what David Lammy said back in 2018.
It definitely creates a perception of insensitivity and will likely generate frustration and resentment among those who feel the UK has a moral obligation to address its colonial past.
So what's the likely outcome here? Are we going to see a big showdown between the UK and Caribbean nations?
It's possible, but it's unlikely to be a public spectacle. These types of disagreements tend to be handled more diplomatically behind closed doors. But it's important to remember that this issue isn't going away anytime soon. The call for reparations is gaining momentum globally, and the UK's reluctance to engage could further strain its relationships within the Commonwealth.
It sounds like the UK is walking a tightrope here. They're trying to navigate this delicate balance between their historical responsibility and their current political and economic interests.
Exactly. And it's a dilemma that many former colonial powers are grappling with. How do you acknowledge the past without jeopardizing the present?
Let's shift gears back to the absence of South Africa and India at CHOGM. What does their decision to attend the BRICS summit tell us about the future of the Commonwealth?
It's a clear signal that the Commonwealth is facing some serious challenges to its relevance. The BRICS bloc, remember that's Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, is emerging as a powerful alternative to the traditional Western-led order. For countries like South Africa and India, who were once firmly within the British sphere of influence, the allure of BRICS is growing.
So are we witnessing the decline of the Commonwealth? Is it becoming a relic of a bygone era?
That's a question that many are asking. The Commonwealth faces a choice. Either adapt to the changing global landscape and become a more inclusive and equitable organization, or risk fading into irrelevance.
What would that adaptation look like?
Well, for starters, it means addressing the historical injustices of colonialism. It means taking concrete action on climate change and giving a greater voice to smaller and less powerful nations.
It sounds like the Commonwealth is at a crossroads.
It is. And CHAGM 2024 is a pivotal moment. The decisions made and the actions taken at this summit will have far-reaching implications for the future of the Commonwealth and its role in the world.
It really does feel like we're witnessing a turning point for the Commonwealth. And when I think about that theme,
Yeah.
one resilient common future, transforming our Commonwealth, it makes me wonder if the Commonwealth can actually live up to those words.
It's a valid question. The theme itself acknowledges the need for transformation and resilience in the face of these global challenges. But can the Commonwealth, burdened by its history and current internal divisions, actually deliver on that promise?
It feels like they're at a crossroads. If they can navigate these tricky issues, climate change, reparations, these shifting global alliances, maybe they can come out stronger and more relevant. But if they fail to address these challenges head-on, well,
It could very well be the beginning of the end for the Commonwealth as we know it, and that would be a loss not just for the member nations, but for the very idea of a global community built on shared values and cooperation.
so for our listener who maybe isn't a diplomat or a world leader, why should they care about what happens at this meeting in Samoa? How does this connect to their everyday life?
That's an important question. The truth is, the issues being discussed at CHOGM impact all of us in some way. Climate change is a global crisis that affects everyone regardless of where they live. And the legacy of colonialism continues to shape our world today, influencing everything from economic inequality to social justice movements. The shifting dynamics of global power will determine the course of international relations for years to come, impacting trade security and countless other aspects of our lives.
So even though this meeting might seem far removed from our daily routines, the ripple effects of the decisions made there will eventually reach us all.
Precisely. That's why it's so important to stay informed and engaged to understand the complexities of these issues and to hold our leaders accountable for the choices they make on the global stage.
Well said. So as we wrap up this deep dive into CHOGM 2024, I'm left with one final thought-provoking question for you, our listener. What do you think the future holds for the Commonwealth? Is it an organization poised for renewal and relevance, or is it destined to fade into the annals of history? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive and add in